So let's just do a real quick review of the three forms of our linear equations. We have slope-intercept, point-slope, and standard form. We're going to go a little bit further than that. We're going to look at how to graph each of these three forms, how to convert each of these three forms. So again, first we have slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Remember that we have m as our slope, and we have b as our y-intercept, or where the line crosses the y-axis. So that point on that line that is right on the y-axis, there's our y-intercept, right? You can think of it in context as the starting point. Okay, then we have point-slope form. Again, m is our slope. And x sub 1 and y sub 1 is one of the points on the line. So that's an ordered pair on the line. In this version, y is going to be by itself, and x is in parentheses. So y by itself, x in parentheses. And then finally we have standard form. So ax plus by equals c. X and y are on the same side of the equation in this form. Now remember that a, b, and c have to be integers. They're not fractions, right? So we don't have fractions, we don't have decimals. No fractions, no decimals, integers or whole numbers. Right, so A, B, and C have to be whole numbers. Okay? All right, now moving on. So we can change any of these forms to any other form of a linear equation, but we're going to start by just changing any of these forms into slope-intercept form. So I'm going to take point-slope form, and I'm going to take standard form, and we're going to turn that into slope-intercept, because we know that slope-intercept is something that we can graph pretty easily. All right, so if we have an equation like this, y equals 3 times x minus 1 plus 5, so this is point-slope, right? We have our slope, and we have a point on the line. Now we could graph that in that way, or we could change this into slope-intercept, right? So step 1, you know that when we have parentheses, we're going to use this distributive property, right? So our first step here is going to be to distribute. So we have 3x minus 3, so we have a 3 times a negative 1, plus 5, and that's all y equals, right? All right, one more step then after we distribute is we are going to combine like terms. All right, so now what do we have? Well, we're going to combine our negative 3 and our positive 5. So we end up with y equals 3x plus 2. So just a two-step process when we go from point slope to slope intercept. So make sure you write this down. We're going to distribute, and then we're going to combine like terms, and that's really all there is to it. So now we have y equals 3x plus 2. Here's our slope. Positive 2 is our y-intercept. Right, so we're going to start at that y-intercept when we go to graph this at y equals 2. So 2 is on the x-axis. And we're going to use our slope from there. So our slope is a positive 3. You can rewrite that as 3 over 1. So we have 3 as our rise. And 1 is our run. Now this is a positive slope, so make sure when we graph this, we're going up towards the right. So we're going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3, which means we're going to have to go to the right 1. Right, now 2 points does make a line. I'm going to do a third one just to make sure I have everything right. So this time I'm going to go down 3 and to the left 1. It looks like all my points are lining up. So from there, I'm going to draw my line right through those points. Right, so there's my line. All right, let's just do one more. So second example, again, we're going to distribute first. So I have negative 2x, and I have negative 2 times negative 3, which is positive 6, plus 1. Again, second step is just to combine those like terms. So I'm going to combine 6 and 1. I have a positive 6 and a positive 1, giving me positive 7. Okay, I'm going to go to graph this. And again, I'm going to start with my y-intercept, which is positive 7, which is going to be up here. My graph doesn't quite go that far. My slope is a negative 2, or I can write that as negative 2 over 1. And this is a negative slope, so I'm going to be going this direction, right, up to the left, or I could say down to the right. So from here, I'm going to go down 2, 1, 2, and to make sure this is going in the right direction, to give me a negative slope, I'm going to go to the right one. I'm going to make one more point, 1, 2, and over 1. I'm going to connect those dots, and there's my line. All right, we're going to skip this third example. We're going to go to this next one. So now what if I have standard form and I want to change that into slope-intercept form? Well, there's just maybe one extra step to this one. Actually, there's really not. There's still only 2 steps, step 1 and step 2 right here. So we're going to do these 2 examples. All right, so my first step says if I want to get this y term alone, I want to undo that x term from the left-hand side. Well, if this is a positive 2x, to undo that, I'm going to subtract 2x. Right? I want to subtract 2x from both sides. Okay, so now I am left with negative 3y. Make sure to leave that sign where it is. So negative 3y, and on the right-hand side, I have 12 minus 2x. Right? I can't just subtract 2 and say 10x because those aren't like terms, right? One's a variable term and one's a constant, so I have to keep those separate. So I have negative 3y equals 12 minus 2x. Now, so that was step 1. I want to undo my x term. Right? Now step 2, to get y alone, I need to divide by that y coefficient. In other words, I need to undo this times negative 3. So to undo times negative 3, I'm going to divide by negative 3. Now be careful because you have to divide every term by negative 3 on this right-hand side. You can't just divide one thing. If you think about that scale, if you're cutting the one side of the scale in half, you need to cut everything on that side of the scale in half. Okay, so in this case, we need to divide everything by negative 3. So I'm left with y equals, all right, now take a look. I have 12 divided by negative 3. So that's going to give me negative 4, right? And then my next one here is negative 2 divided by negative 3. So that gives me, in fraction form, positive 2/3, right? A negative divided by a negative is a positive. All right, so I have 2/3. Let's not use decimals, let's use fractions because it's easier to do our slope from there to see our rise and run. Now this isn't exactly in slope-intercept form, it's an intercept form, which is just fine as long as you can recognize your slope and your intercept. But we'll go ahead and swap that around so I'll actually be technically in slope-intercept form. So if we do our slope first, it's going to be 2/3 x minus 4. And again, I can graph from there with a y-intercept of negative 4, and I can do my slope of 2/3 from there. All right, let's just try one more over here. So again, if I undo the x term, subtract 4x from both sides, I'm going to have now positive y, or positive 1y, equals, I'm going to go ahead and put this right into slope-intercept form. So instead of 6 minus 4x, I'm going to say negative 4x plus 6. That's a positive 6, right? So already I'm in slope-intercept form. In this case, my coefficient is 1. So I don't really have to, I can skip step 2. It says divide by my y coefficient. Well, my y coefficient is 1, so dividing by 1 isn't going to do anything for me. So this was really a pretty simple one-step problem. I already have slope-intercept form, y equals negative 4x plus 6. Okay, let's just try one more with those two steps. So pause the video at this point and do this one for yourself and see what you get. Remember those two steps, right? We're going to undo our x term, and then we're going to divide by our y coefficient. All right, so pause the video and make sure that you've gone through all the steps to get slope-intercept form. All right, so let's just do this real quick step by step. So again, one, I want to undo the x term, so I'm going to subtract 3x. Right, so I'm left with negative 2y. Remember that negative, don't forget it. And then I could say 2 minus 3x, but I could also flip-flop that, and I could say negative 3x and a positive 2, or plus 2. And I'm doing that so that when I'm finished, I'll already have slope-intercept form with my slope first. Second step was to undo that y coefficient, so to divide by negative 2. And I want to make sure I'm dividing everything by negative 2. As a matter of fact, let me show it this way instead, just to show that we're dividing everything. I'm going to divide that by negative 2, and I'm also going to divide this by negative 2. Okay, so divide every term by negative 2, and I'm left with x. Right? We're going to undo that negative 2. On the right-hand side, I have a negative 3 over a negative 2, so negative over negative is going to be a positive 3 halves. So there's my slope, 3 halves x. And I have a positive 2 over a negative 2, so a positive divided by a negative is going to give me a negative, right? So now I have a negative 1 or minus 1. So my slope-intercept form is 3 halves x minus 1, the y-intercept of negative 1, and a slope of positive 3 halves. So let's just double check and make sure we're right. All right, so we have intercept form here. We have slope-intercept form here. Those are the same thing with my slope and my intercept just flipped around.